those of you who know Eiseley's essays will know how layered they are, how hard it is to, how unfair to the essays themselves it is to excerpt from them. So often they're composed in 4 or 5 sections, which are sometimes like movements in a symphony or parts of a sonata. So I feel partly guilty about, taking a small section, this great essay, The Innocent Fox, out. A little bit of background. This is only part of section 3 of the essay. And if you know the essay, you'll know that it covers several generations or several decades in Eiseley's life, many different locations and so on. And yet it's all interwoven into this amazing texture that keeps coming back. So the scene preceded, in just limiting this to part 3 of the essay, which begins on a beach where Eiseley found himself and with an abandoned boat. There's a very powerful, I think, deeply personal passage where while he's on this boat, left alone, photographers and other scientists have left, and he has this memory of his father, the last days of his father in a room, and a lot about his hands, about his father's hands becoming separate from the body and detached from him and so on. So he goes on to this reverie that lasts a couple of pages at least. I'd love to be able to read you that, but I will instead move ahead from that to where he comes out of his reverie, and I'll read you the last section of the essay with 3 or 4 paragraphs taken out for the interests of keeping within 5 minutes. I was a biologist, but I chose not to examine my hands. The fog and night were lifting. I had been far away for hours, he means in his reverie. Crouched in my heavy sheepskin, I waited without thought, as the witch doctor might have waited for the morning dispersion of his god. Finally, the dawn began to touch the sea, and then the worn timbers of the hulk beside which I sheltered reddened just a little. It was then I began to glimpse the world from a different perspectives. I had watched for nights the great bolts leaping across the pane of an attic window, the bolts Emerson had dreamed in the first scientific days might be the force that hurled reptile into mammal. I had watched at midnight the mad scientists intent upon their own creation. But in the end, those fantastic flashes of the lightning had ceased without issue, at least for me. The window pane, the inscrutable pane, had darkened at last. The scientists, if scientists they were, had departed, carrying their secret with them. I sighed, remembering. It was then I saw the miracle. I saw it because I was hunched at ground level, smelling rank of fox, and no longer gazing with upright human arrogance upon the things of the world. I did not realize at first what it was that I looked upon. As my wandering attention centered, I saw nothing but 2 small projecting ears lit by the morning sun. Beneath them, a small, neat face looked shyly up at me. The ears moved at every sound, drank in a gull's cry and the far horn of a ship. They crinkled, I began to realize, only with curiosity. They had not learned to fear. The creature was very young. He was alone in a dread universe. I crept on my knees around the prow and crouched beside him. It was a small fox popped from a den under the timbers who looked up at me. God knows what had become of his brothers and sisters. His parent must have not been home from hunting. He innocently selected what I think was a chicken bone from an untidy pile of splintered rubbish and shook at me invitingly. There was a vast and playful humor in his face. If there was only one fox in the world and I would kill him, I would do. The words of a British poacher in a pub rasped in my ears. I dropped even further and painfully away from human stature. It has been said repeatedly that one can never, try as he will, get around to the front of the universe. Man is destined to see only its far side, to realize nature only in retreat. Yet there was the thing in the midst of the bones, the wide-eyed innocent fox inviting me to play with the innate courtesy of its tiny forepaws placed appealingly together along with a mock shake of the head. The universe was swinging in some fantastic fashion around to present its face, and the face was so small that the universe itself was laughing. It was not a time for human dignity. It was a time only for the careful observance of amenities written behind the stars. Gravely, I arranged my forepaws while the pup whimpered with ill-conceived excitement. I drew the breath of a fox's den into my nostrils. On impulse, I picked up clumsily a whiter bone and shook it in teeth that had not entirely forgotten their original purpose. Round and round, we tumbled for one ecstatic moment. We were the innocent thing in the midst of the bones, born in the egg, born in the den, born in the dark cave with the stone axe close to hand, born at last in human guise to grow coldly remote in the room with a rifle rack upon the wall. But I had seen the miracle. I had seen the universe as it begins for all things. It was, in reality, a child's universe, a tiny and laughing universe. I rolled the pup on his back and ran, literally ran for the nearest ridge. The sun was half out of the sea and the world was swinging back to normal. The adult foxes would be ready, trotting home. But a little farther on, I passed one on a ridge who knew well I had no gun, for it swung by close, stepping delicately with brush and head held high. Its face was watchful but averted. It did not matter. It was what I had experienced and the fox had experienced, what we all experience in adulthood. We passed carefully on our separate ways into the morning, eyes not meeting. And then I'll skip 3 paragraphs and conclude. I had been permitted to correct time's error for a space of perhaps 5 minutes, and that is a boon not granted to all men. If I were to render report upon this episode, I would say that men must find a way to run the arrow backward. Doubtless, it is impossible in the physical world, but in the memory and the will, man may achieve the deed if he would try. For just a moment, I had held the universe at bay by the simple expedient of sitting on my haunches before a fox den and tumbling a boat with a chicken bone. It is the gravest, most meaningful act I shall ever accomplish, but as Thoreau once remarked of some peculiar errand of his own, there is no use reporting it to the Royal Society. And so, I mean, there's such a great mix there, I think, of Eiseley's melancholy and his gentleness, certainly his humor, his sense of self-mythologizing, his affection for the small and the innocent things. There's a lot going on there, and that's just this one section of a much bigger canvas. That whole essay.